The mayor of London just said something that sent shockwaves through the entire city. At an emergency housing summit in October 2025, Keir Starmer warned that London's housing market isn't just struggling, it's about to get much, much worse. For years, Londoners believed the crisis was coming someday in the future. But it's not coming anymore, it's here. 3 families were made homeless in a single week. Not because of job loss, not because of neglect, but because the math of living in London has stopped working. People are working full-time jobs, and still losing their homes. But here's the truth that wasn't in that press release, what the mayor didn't say out loud. Behind closed doors, his advisors are calling this the beginning of London's housing apocalypse. Before we break this down, the warning, the real numbers, and what's about to happen next. If you care about where this city is headed, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what's coming isn't just a housing story, it's the story of how ordinary people get pushed out of the cities they built. Keir Starmer didn't mince words that day. Standing in front of developers, housing experts, and journalists, he warned that London could face its worst housing crisis in 50 years. He spoke calmly, but you could feel the tension in the room. Behind the numbers and forecasts was something much darker: panic. What the mayor didn't share publicly was the private data his housing team had shown him just days earlier. Internal projections suggesting that tens of thousands of households were on the brink of collapse. Not next year. Not next decade. Now. And yet, his message to the press afterward was softened, polished for public consumption. The official statement spoke about monitoring the situation and long-term housing solutions. But inside City Hall, his advisors were using a different phrase: imminent collapse. The reason? A perfect storm of economic pressure, interest rates doubling, landlords fleeing, property prices stalling, and rental costs exploding. London wasn't just becoming expensive, it was becoming mathematically impossible to live in. For the first time in modern history, even middle-income families, nurses, teachers, and police officers, were falling through the cracks. And yet, the warning barely made headlines. Because London's crisis doesn't announce itself with earthquakes or riots. It happens quietly, one eviction at a time. One rent increase email. One family packing boxes at midnight. And the mayor knows, what's breaking right now isn't just the market, it's the city's soul. Let's make this real. Because when politicians say, housing crisis, they're not talking about numbers, they're talking about people like these 3 families. The first, a teacher and a nurse with 2 young kids. They'd lived in Clapham for 4 years. Then their landlord's mortgage jumped from £1,800 to nearly £3,000 a month. He couldn't keep up. He sold. The buyer evicted them for renovations. Within days, that flat, their home, became a listing on Airbnb. The second, a social worker and an accountant. Their Islington apartment was replaced by short-term holiday lets. The landlord said, "It's just business." They spent 3 months searching for a new place and ended up living in a friend's spare room with their baby. The third, 2 NHS workers. Their rent jumped from £2,000 to £3,200 in 2 months. They tried to make it work. But when the final notice came, they packed their things, left the keys on the counter, and drove away without a plan. These aren't isolated incidents. They're the new normal. Ordinary, hardworking families being erased from the city's map. And what's terrifying is how normal it's starting to feel. Because every time someone's priced out, their absence becomes someone else's opportunity. A developer flips the flat. A landlord relists it for double. And London keeps pretending this is just how it works. But this isn't a market adjustment. It's the slow-motion eviction of an entire generation. Something fundamental has broken in London's housing market, and it's not just about prices. For decades, property values only moved one direction, up. That belief became gospel. But in August 2025, the first crack appeared. Prices fell by just 0.3%. Tiny, right? But in a city built on the myth of property always wins, that small dip meant something huge. Confidence had died. Estate agents whispered what no one wanted to admit: buyers had vanished. Viewings dropped. Offers came in 20% below asking, and most fell through. Homes sat empty, unsold, while sellers refused to cut prices. Everyone was waiting for someone else to blink. It's not just numbers on a screen, it's paralysis. Families trapped in negative equity. Developers holding projects mid-construction. Landlords trying to sell before their mortgages crush them. The middle market, those £500,000 to £2 million homes in Wandsworth, Lewisham, Hackney, once the heart of London's housing ladder, is collapsing. These weren't investment trophies, they were family homes. Teachers, firefighters, nurses. Now, they're unsellable. London's property engine has turned on itself, a machine that fed on confidence now eating its own supply. Because when homes stop moving, cities stop breathing. No one can buy. No one can sell. No one can leave. And for the first time in half a century, the dream of getting on the ladder feels like a punchline. The illusion of stability is gone, and everyone's pretending not to notice. But that's only half the story. Because while the market freezes, something much worse is happening in the background, a rental war unlike anything London has seen before. The numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the full story either. London's average rent hit £2,300 per month in early 2025. That's a 4.5% jump in 3 months. Sounds bad? In Camden, it's 14%. In Notting Hill, it's 9%. For a young professional earning £50,000 a year, that's about £3,000 a month after tax. Financial experts say you should spend no more than 30% on rent. That's £900. But in London, the average flat is £2,300. Even if you stretch to 50%, you're still short every single month. It's not avocado toast. It's basic arithmetic. People aren't broke because they're irresponsible. They're broke because London's housing equation no longer works. Every new listing has a queue, 8 renters for every flat. Some offering months of rent up front, some begging landlords just to consider them. One missed paycheck, one unexpected bill, and you're out. And what's more terrifying, it's not just the poor being squeezed. Middle-class professionals, people who once were the city's backbone, are being pushed to the edge. Room shares that used to cost £700 are now £1,000. Flats once affordable for families are being carved into micro-units. The market's become a lottery where only the desperate or the wealthy win. Everyone else, they move further out. Longer commutes. Smaller rooms. And slowly, piece by piece, the city empties of the people who actually keep it running. Because when the rent becomes higher than the dream dies quietly. In inboxes filled with eviction notices. But what's fueling this war isn't just greed, it's a mortgage system spiraling out of control. And that's where things turn catastrophic. For years, London's property market floated on cheap money. Interest rates near zero made everyone feel rich, until 2025, when reality came crashing in. Rates jumped from 0% to 4%, and banks started calling. Suddenly, that manageable £1,600 mortgage became £2,300. Same house. Same family. £700 more, gone. Every month. For landlords, it's even worse. Buy-to-let owners who once cleared a few £100s a month are now losing money. The math stopped working, rent can't rise fast enough to keep up with their new payments. So they sell. Or they evict. And when they do, another property disappears from the rental market. This is the quiet domino effect no one's talking about. Forced sales, repossessions, panicked listings. Over 40,000 homeowners in London are now at risk of losing their homes. Not speculators. Not flippers. Ordinary families who did what the system told them to do: work hard, buy a home, secure your future. Now they're trapped, too broke to stay, too underwater to sell. First-time buyers? Completely locked out. Even with falling prices, banks are tightening lending. Higher deposits. Stricter checks. Dreams deferred indefinitely. It's not just a housing problem, it's a confidence crisis. And confidence, once it cracks, doesn't come back quickly. What we're watching is the slow unraveling of the very thing that defined London for decades, the belief that property was safe. That's gone. And the collapse is creating another chain reaction. A mass landlord exodus. And an Airbnb explosion turning homes into profit machines. Landlords are leaving, fast. In 2024, 19% sold properties. Only 8% bought new ones. Now, surveys say 41% plan to exit completely. That's nearly half of London's rental supply at risk of disappearing. Why? Because nothing adds up anymore. Mortgage payments doubled, insurance costs exploded, regulations tightened. And the government's renters reform bill stripped away no-fault evictions, making it harder to remove tenants even when they don't pay. For many, it's no longer worth it. They're cashing out. And when they sell, they're not selling to other landlords, they're selling to owner-occupiers or investors who flip the property for Airbnb. Since 2021, the number of short-term lets has tripled, from 30,000 to 100,000. That's 70,000 homes pulled out of the long-term market. Airbnb promised flexibility. But what it delivered was scarcity. Each one of those holiday homes is a family that can't find a place to live. The mayor's office wants to regulate them, registration systems, enforcement, penalties. But it's too late. Even if 40% of illegal listings disappeared, most owners wouldn't re-rent. They'd sell. And when they do, more homes leave the rental pool forever. London is being hollowed out by its own housing economics. A city where homes make money only when no one lives in them. And the damage isn't just financial, it's cultural. Neighborhoods once filled with families now sit silent, replaced by rolling suitcases and temporary guests. But the true tragedy comes next. Because when a city becomes unlivable, the people who hold it together start to vanish. You can measure a city's health by one simple question. Can the people who keep it alive afford to live there? In London, that answer is turning into a painful no. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, the people who hold this city together, are leaving in waves. Not because they want to, but because they have no choice. Some NHS workers now commute from towns 50 miles away, spending hours every day just to earn enough to pay rent they can barely afford. Teachers are quitting, not out of burnout, but because their paychecks vanish the moment rent is due. Even fire stations are struggling to staff crews. The people who run toward danger can't afford to live near the communities they protect. This isn't a statistic. It's the slow death of a city's heartbeat. And it's not just about workers, it's about what happens after they're gone. When classrooms have no teachers. When hospitals have empty wards. When your bus route disappears because there's no one left to drive it. That's what the mayor's advisors meant when they said the crisis threatens the viability of London itself. Because a city isn't defined by its skyline, it's defined by its people. And if the only ones left are those too rich to notice or too poor to leave, London risks becoming something it's never been before, hollow. What happens next isn't just economic collapse, it's an identity crisis. And the projections for the next 18 months show exactly how deep this could go. Inside City Hall, the projections are bleak. Analysts predict London house prices could fall another 10 to 15% by late 2026. But instead of relief, it'll bring chaos. Because falling prices don't help when you're trapped in negative equity. Tens of thousands of homeowners will owe more than their homes are worth. Landlords will panic sell. Rents, unbelievably, will still rise, crossing £3,000 per month on average. And when the dust settles, the middle will be gone. The city will belong to two groups. Those rich enough to own, and those poor enough to be subsidized. Everyone else, the backbone of London's workforce, will be pushed out. It's already happening. Data shows record migration among 25 to 35-year-olds. Entire generations quietly leaving the capital, taking their creativity, energy, and future with them. For the first time in modern history, young people are looking at London, once the dream, and saying, it's just not worth it. That's the real emergency. Not falling prices, not rising rents, but the silent unraveling of London's spirit. Because when people stop believing in the place they live, no policy can bring it back. It's not just homes being lost, it's hope. The mayor's warning wasn't political theater. It was a plea, an alarm bell for a city standing at the edge. He knows that without immediate action, London won't just become unaffordable. It will become unlivable. London's housing crisis isn't a storm you can wait out. It's erosion, slow, constant, devastating. Every month, another family packs up. Another local cafe closes. Another street loses its neighbors. And while the numbers make headlines, the real story plays out quietly. In the nurse who sleeps in her car between shifts. In the teacher who drives 2 hours each way just to afford a one-bedroom flat. In the families who whisper to their kids, "We'll find a new home soon," knowing they probably won't. What's breaking isn't just the housing market. It's trust, in the promise that hard work can still buy stability. In the idea that cities belong to the people who build them. Because the truth is, London doesn't have a housing problem. It has a values problem. Homes became assets. Streets became investments. And people became statistics. The mayor's warning wasn't a forecast. It was a confession. That London is running out of time to save itself. But here's the thing. Awareness is the first step. If enough people see what's happening, and refuse to normalize it, there's still a chance to pull this city back from the edge. Because a city isn't glass towers or train lines. It's people. And if London loses its people, it doesn't just lose its housing market. It loses its soul. If you found this breakdown important, share it. Subscribe for more deep dives into what's really happening behind the headlines. Because the truth deserves to be heard before it's too late.